Welcome to your Canadiens Connection on Rocket Sports Radio. We are proud to be the trusted source for all things Habs for more than a decade. This is the Canadiens Connection Podcast.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Canadiens Connection Podcast here on Rocket Sports Radio, keeping you informed, engaged, and entertained. My name is Michael Spinella, and I'll be your host for the next hour. This is episode 299 of the Canadiens Connection Podcast, and I'm very pleased to be joined in the studio by my co-host, the editor of the Hockey News Montreal, the founder and the president of Rocket Sports, Rick Stevens. And how are you doing today, Rick? It's F1 weekend. I know you're a big fan of that.
That I am. Welcome back to you. And unlike I said last week, you hadn't gone back to Peru to fetch your sunglasses. That was misinformation, and I apologize for that. You were doing something more fun, I think.
Fun, yeah.
But as you say, yes, we are. It's kind of the start to festival season in Montreal. It's the F1 Canadian Grand Prix, which will happen on Sunday afternoon. I pay attention to Canadian Grand Prix. First year that I'm involved in a fantasy with a fantasy team, and I take instruction from our fantasy guru, the commissioner of our fantasy leagues, BZ Brian, and he's helped me along with that. We'll see what happens. Weather not great for practice 1 or practice 2 sessions on Friday. Rain in the forecast for Sunday. We'll see how that affects the race, and we'll see how that affects. It won't affect fans. There'll be plenty of fans there, and there'll be plenty of celebrity sightings. I'm sure the Canadiens players last year. Remember, that's where Trevor Zegras and Cole Caulfield were spotted. I think Cole Caulfield's still in Italy, so that may not happen. But you said that you spotted someone that might be at the race this weekend.
Yeah, according to the lovely folks on Twitter, there's been a Dawson Mercer sighting and possibly a Simon Nemec sighting as well over at the F1 this morning. Of course, Dawson Mercer might come back and to play in this podcast as we go along here, but always fun to see the NHLers out. Yep.
A little tease, that name may come back in the second segment. So tell the folks what we're talking about today in episode 299, one away from the glorious 300th episode of the Canadiens Connection.
Well, we're actually F1's going to come back into play first thing in this episode, just before we get to some news and roster news from the Montreal Canadiens. We'll also talk about some prospects as we continue our draft 2024 coverage. And then we have some news from around the NHL to end this segment 1. And in segment 2, we have a segment entitled Trade Plan on Draft Day. 10 players the Canadiens could target. We'll talk about that in detail as we put together a little bit of a list here as to who we think Montreal could be interested in. And in segment 3, we'll turn it over to all of our listeners for the Have Your Say segment, our Canadiens Connection. Question of the week is, are Marty Necas and Trevor Zegras worth the price tag to acquire, and what would you be willing to trade to bring them to Montreal? We want to hear from you, and Rick, what's the best way to reach out to us?
Well, for this episode 299, Draft and Trade, Canadiens' dual approach to accelerating their rebuild, you can reach out to us and give your comments via text. It's easy. Text us 24 hours a day at the Rocket Sports text line. It is 5853-ROCKET. That's 5853-ROCKET.
You can also reach out to us on social media. Just make sure you're following at Habs Connection on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Plus, you can check out the website, CanadiensConnection.fm. And here's what's happened since we've been gone, and we like to start things off with an interesting story from this past week. This was put on to thn.com/Montreal just the other day. Valtteri Bottas skates with the Canadiens as F1 week takes over Montreal, and this was pretty interesting. Nice sighting there, and like I said, F1 still at play in this podcast.
Yeah, we remember last year, I think Fernando Alonso started it a couple years ago where he was wearing a Canadiens jersey in the paddock. Last year, it was Gunter Steiner coming down and putting on the pads, dressing as a goaltender, and some of the Canadiens taking shots at him. This year, it's Valtteri Bottas with Kick and Sauber, the F1 team. And he laced up the skates with Raphael Harvey-Pinard and Alex Newhook, and also presented them with jersey. Valtteri Bottas got a jersey, but he presented them with a jersey. Of course, he's from Finland, and he presented them with jerseys from the Lahti Pelicans. So, fascinating story. And Valtteri Bottas did something that everyone who I know who's a hockey fan wants to do, and that's drive the Zamboni. And there's some great pictures, a great article. Amy Johnson is an F1 fan. She wrote it up. Valtteri Bottas skates with the Canadiens as F1 week takes over Montreal. You can find it, of course, as you can find all our coverage at thn.com/Montreal.
So make sure you check out Habs Notebook posts and feature articles appearing daily at thn.com/Montreal throughout this offseason. And for our roster news, the Canadiens made a signing. They signed 27-year-old Swiss goaltender Connor Hughes to a 1-year, 2-way contract. Looked into this. No relation to Kent Hughes, no relation to Jack Hughes or Luke Hughes or any of those brothers either. He spent most of his career split between the NL and the SL, originally from London, Ontario. So he'll be coming back to Canada, and he'll give the Habs some much-needed goaltending depth. And this is kind of an interesting signing, isn't it?
This is very interesting. As you said, born in London, Ontario, played for the London Nationals, just like Logan Mailloux did in his youth. But then the rest of his experience has been in Europe. And as you said, playing in the Swiss League. He has very good statistics from this past season, especially. Didn't play a lot of games. His goals against and save percentage are high. His 10 wins, 7 losses. Maybe that doesn't look so great. Was very good in the playoffs. But 27 years old, and I think back to when the season ended for the Laval Rocket, and you had JF Houle coming to the microphone on cleanout day and saying, it's important to have not only to have veterans on the team to help guide and mentor the prospects who are coming through, but it's important to have the right veterans, the veterans who are not going to get in the way, who are going to be competing for a spot, to understand that their role is, as Kent Hughes has said, to support the prospects, the draft picks, the players who are working their way. They're not going to be taking their place. And have aspirations of their own. Well, I think that Connor Hughes might have aspirations of his own. I'm going to get a quote here from him. He says, we said played in Europe for Lausanne HC. I said, Lausanne HC gave me a chance, and I'm very proud to have been part of this historic season for the club. Everyone welcomed me with open arms, the players, the staff, the fans, and that's one of the reasons I had such a great year in Lausanne. To have such an opportunity in the NHL with such a great organization as the Montreal Canadiens is simply a dream for me. I'll remember my time here fondly and wish you all the best for next season. All right, so that's kind of boilerplate kind of stuff. But then there was an interview on a Swiss site Swiss sports site called Blick, and he said, and they asked him how this this happened, how it came about. And he said that suddenly there was, during the playoffs of his team, there was a scout from the Canadiens that started showing up. And his agent, and his agent is Derek McCann, said, hey, there's a Canadian scout here that wants to meet with you. This is during the playoffs. And they had a few conversations, and then nothing happened. It was all quiet on the Western Front. And he said, which was good because I didn't need this distraction during the playoffs, and it allowed me to concentrate on my game. Then 2 weeks ago, I received the news that Montreal was interested in signing me. After that, everything happened quite quickly. So how is there even a connection? How is there a connection with the Canadiens? Well, Lausanne's goaltending coach just so happens to be Cristobal Huet. You remember Cristobal Huet?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And shipped out and Bob Gainey to give, because Guy Carbonneau wouldn't stop playing Cristobal Huet, and give the prospect at that time, Carey Price, a chance. He got shipped out. Many people blame Carey Price for that all these years later, because Cristobal Huet, not a great goaltender, but a beloved personality in Montreal. Anyway, there's the connection. So is there any connection for Connor Hughes? Well, he grew up in London. He doesn't say it explicitly, but most likely a Leafs fan. However, he said he would see the Canadiens, and because this is a quote, because Carey Price was their goalie, I always watched. He was the goalie that everyone wanted to emulate. Technically, there is no one better than Carey Price. I'm from Ontario, 2 hours from Montreal, so I'm going to have to convince my friends to support a new team. So we know where that's going. He also says that his wife's family is from Ottawa, so it works out really well for him and his wife. And they say, well, what about, is this a real opportunity? What's going to happen? Have you been given any guarantees? Guarantees about playing time, where you're going to play, all of that sort of thing. He says, we've discussed it. Unless there's big surprises, I'm probably going to start the season in Laval. That's the Canadiens farm team. I don't put a lot of stock in guarantees. Guarantees are pointless anyway. If I had been told that I was a regular player for the Canadiens, then I played badly, would I have been kept with the Canadiens? Probably not. Conversely, it doesn't mean anything about me starting in Laval. I'm going there with that attitude. He's going there with the expectation that he's going to have a chance to fight for a position in Montreal. Is that healthy for Jakub Dobas, who needs a veteran to support him and his development? I don't know. I don't know. But the Canadiens saw something in Connor Hughes that they like. The difficulty is going to be, and we've heard this from European goaltenders over and over and over and over and over again, it's harder for a goaltender to adjust to the smaller ice surface than it is for a forward or a defenseman, because the angles are all different, and that there's a lot more pucks that come from all different places, particularly in front of the net, and there's lots of traffic in the net. Fortunately, Connor Hughes is not a small goaltender, 6'4", 225. So kind of an evolving story. That's what we know, and it's going to unfold as we go, and we'll keep you abreast of everything as it happens.
For sure. And there was actually another free agent signing as Montreal signed free agent winger Josh Nadeau of the University of Maine. He will attend Montreal development camp. He's 20 years old, from New Brunswick. He put up 45 points in 34 games last season. So interesting player that they're going to bring in and take a look at development camp here. Yeah,
no commitment there to Josh Nadeau, just simply an invitation. And it's going to be interesting. Josh Nadeau is probably best known as the brother of Bradley Nadeau, who was the first-round pick of the Carolina Hurricanes in 2023, 30th overall. He's a small player. He's not a big player. 5'8", 159 is what he's listed as, but a free agent currently. He had 45 points in 37 games with the University of Maine. Very skilled, good hands, but size is going to be an issue. But he has an invitation to camp to maybe catch the attention of the Canadiens and earn a contract.
Canadiens defenseman Jordan Harris was named Sports Personality of the Year. The Canadiens defenseman was honored at the 20th edition of the Sports Celebrity Breakfast, organized by the Cummings Center Foundation. They raised more than $400,000 this past year, and I guess nice for Jordan Harris. I know he's been pretty involved in the community here, so nice for him to get honored at that Sports Celebrity Breakfast.
Yeah, I agree. A great selection. Jordan Harris is a great person, a great personality, and as you said, makes a full commitment to the community. So nice that he's recognized with this award.
And with that, I think it's a good time to get to the Habs prospect report.
It's time for the Rocket Report. The Rocket Sports Media Team is your premier source for information about the Laval Rocket, the AHL affiliate of the Montreal Canadiens, as well as Habs prospects playing in the CHL, NCAA, and leagues around the world. Bookmark thn.com/Montreal to follow our comprehensive coverage of Canadiens prospects.
So weekly, we've been providing coverage on the 2024 NHL entry draft that's coming up later in June. And to start things off, the NHL Scouting Combine 2024 player testing is taking place in Buffalo on Saturday, today as we record. So a good opportunity here to see the players work out and interview them. We do have some audio coming up a little bit later, but we typically get more leaks from the Scouting Combine after the fact than during, but so far the Montreal Canadiens have started to talk to some of the prospects that they could be eyeing with their fifth overall pick.
So what is the Combine? It's something that takes place in Buffalo every year. It started on Monday. And all the scouts are there. All the hockey ops staff is there for, not the coaches, but the scouts and GMs and so on are there watching these prospects, gathering information that they couldn't gain otherwise. They set up interviews, they set up dinners. The physical testing, there's been a couple of tests, but for the most part, the physical testing occurs on Saturday. Today, as we record, there is the horizontal jump. There is the bench press. There is the shuttle run that measures ability. I think the one that grabs the most attention is the Wingate test. That's the one measuring the VO2 max, and yes, we've seen pictures of players after doing the Wingate test, and our guests who are sick, who are it is miserable. It's a miserable test. So that's been going on all day today as we're recording. So we're going to talk about it, the Combine a little bit today, but next week we're going to spend a lot of time on that with Michael Agello, a colleague from the Hockey News, who has been there all week gathering information, and we're going to have him as a special guest. What have we gleaned so far? Well, first of all, there's some players, and we know this happened last year. There are players who have opted out either from injury or because the seasons have just finished for whatever reason from the testing. Demidov is not there to be tested. Beckett Seneca, he's not doing the physical tests. He was injured late in the season, but he's there to talk to some of the teams. How many players do the Canadiens interview? Well, they don't tell us. Typically, from what I know, it's been 70, 75 players that they interview. Yes, 70 to 75 players. Somebody said that they're likely to interview 100 players this past week in Buffalo. What do those interviews consist of? Well, we've seen that. Remember the videos? David Reinbacher last year, Jacob Fowler interviews from the Combine. There was that miserable, awful, terrible, bad question that they asked David Reinbacher about having to shoot down his. Imagine you're in World War II, your squad's in the water, and you have to shoot them. Anyway, it was terrible, awful. But Dr. David Scott, psychologist for the Canadiens, is in charge of that, and for whatever reason, he typically asks bizarre questions to put the prospects in a uncomfortable position. And we'll be getting more of that and talk about that a lot more next week. What we know, it was Sasha Boisvert, and we've talked about Sasha Boisvert, maybe available when the Canadiens' second first-round pick comes up at 26, may be available. We've talked about who he is, from Trois-Rivières, played for Muskegon in the USHL, good size. Anyway, the Canadiens interviewed him, and what did he have to say about his meeting with the team, with the representatives and Dr. David Scott? He says, the interview with the Canadiens was more intense than several others, definitely. There were a lot of people in the room, and as you know, the rooms are quite tight, very small, usually in the luxury boxes up top. And at one point in Buffalo, the psychologist sat at the end of his chair, and Sasha's referring to Dr. David Scott. The psychologist sat at the end of the chair to challenge me with his gaze. I did the same. He then understood that he couldn't have me, says Sasha. That's reported by Anthony Martineau. So mind games that are going on, trying to intimidate these young prospects, but all from the Combine. The other thing that, in addition to the uncomfortable interviews, there are the more pleasant dinners. We remember Joris Slafkovsky said, I didn't get a dinner, but what I got tasted better than dinner. What we know is Caden Lindstrom got a dinner with the Canadiens. Jerome McGinley, his son, got a dinner. TJ Ginla. And I think that's all. We'll have some more information about this this next week. But always interesting. Always some good information comes out of it, especially when they publish the results of the physical tests, and then the anecdotes that some of the prospects release about their experience, especially with the Canadiens, who are known to have the toughest of or at least the most unusual of the interviews.
Yeah, and since you mentioned the dinners, I think, if I'm not mistaken, neither Slafkovsky nor Reinbacher were brought to dinner by the Canadiens, so I don't know if that can tell us anything about the moves that Montreal might go ahead and make this season, but you're looking for little tidbits and little nuggets that you can take away, and of course, looking forward to next week and seeing what else comes out from this NHL draft combine, and with that, continuing along with...
and I'll just say, just one more thing. I want to give a shout out to the folks at Reddit, the Habs Reddit in particular, Habs on Reddit. There was a question. Let me see if I can find it here. Under the category of Combine News, Joe Bale says and is asking, what's a good media to hear about the Combine results this week? I'd like to read about the results highlights, but I'm not sure journalist media platform to check for. Does anybody have any suggestions? Cantana Brigante says, if you want news from the NHL, there's the Puck Podcast. If you want a Habs-specific rundown, the Canadiens Connection podcast does it in their first section. They are Hockey News affiliated media. Thanks to Ken Tana for the shout-out. Thanks to Habs Reddit. And yes, we're not only covering the Combine 1 week. We're covering it this week, and then we'll have a special guest next week to discuss what went on in the Combine.
So with that, I think we have a couple of NHL mock drafts to get to. As you usually say, another day, another athletic NHL mock draft for 2024. And there's two of them to get to, actually. So this first one was put together by Corey Proman and Wheeler. They have the Montreal Canadiens taking Berkeley Catton at number 5. So, of course, find me a mock draft that does not have Macklin Celebrini number 1. In this particular one, they have Demidov number 2, Levshunov number 3, number 4, Yakemchuk, and then coming in number 5, like I said, Catton, which is an interesting pick. Of course, he's going to be a center. They note that Montreal does have quite a few high-end defensive prospects, which is why they felt that Catton might be a good fit here. And interesting that they have them skipping over one Caden Lindstrom.
Yeah, Lindstrom drops to 9 to Calgary, I think, in this particular mock. Maybe concerned about injury issues, but yeah, interesting that the Canadiens take Catton. But the Canadiens making a surprise pick at the draft with their first round pick is old news, right?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't be surprised with that. 2.0 actually has another kind of surprise pick at number 5, if you want to get to that too. Of course, Celebrini number 1, number 2, Levshunov, 3 is Saleyev, 4, Caden Lindstrom, and number 5, still available, is Demidov. So in the 2.0 version of the mock draft by Corey Pronman, the Montreal Canadiens select Ivan Demidov. I would be surprised to see if he was still available at number 5, but if he is, that's the obvious pick, I would think.
Yeah. And again, this mock has Levshunov going to the Blackhawks at number 2. I think that might set the tone. The second pick, we don't know who the Blackhawks are going to take. Are they going to go for a defenseman, Levshunov, who would be a tremendous pick, or how can they leave Demidov on the board? Pairing him with Connor Bedard would be a bit of a dream. So that, I think, is going to largely influence what's going to happen. But for the Chicago Blackhawks to pass on Demidov, for the Columbus Blue Jackets to then pass on Demidov, and for him to fall in the lap of the Canadiens, we'll see. We'll see. But these mocks are always fun, and I know that our listeners are anxious to get the news for mocks. Not everybody has an athletic subscription, so we're glad to report it here.
And we've been doing extensive draft coverage. We did put out 2 previous episodes with some NHL draft experts. If you want to go back and check out episode 298, entitled Top Picks, Scouting Director Identifies Key Draft Targets for Montreal Canadiens. We have Jerome Berube on there. We have Jerome Berube every single year. He's one of my favorites to listen to. And going back a little bit further, episode 296, this one's entitled Elite Prospects Scout Ranks Montreal Canadiens Draft Options. That's with Russ Cohen, who's another mainstay on Canadiens Connection podcast. So if you haven't already, definitely go back and check those out for great draft information. If you already have listened to it, I would double down and go back and re-listen to some of these, knowing all the new information that we have now, and see if we can put any perspective on it.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think that there's a lot of, on social media, you see all kinds of folks who are talking about who they would pick, and they've watched a video on YouTube, but I mean nobody beats these 2 draft experts, scouting director from Hockey Prospect, Jerome Berube, and Elite Prospects in Russ Cohn. They have a wealth of information. If you haven't listened to these, you're going to want to go and make sure in your draft prep, your own draft prep, to get ready for the draft 2024. These are a must listen.
Absolutely. And believe it or not, we have some news coming from the Laval Rocket this week, as the Laval Rocket have signed forward Israel Mianskum to a 2-year AHL contract. He spent last season with Sherbrooke of the QMJHL, put up 87 points in 61 games. So at least statistically wise, that's pretty good, but a little bit of a surprise signing here, don't you think?
I think so. Again, going back to JF Wool said we need the right veteran presence to help us. And when we go out and make our signings, it's got to be those veterans who understand that they're in a mentoring role. Israel's not a veteran at all, just 21 years of age. Has been passed over in the draft every year. Played 5 seasons, which is a little unusual. For one team in the QMJHL, that is the Sherbrooke Phoenix. And let's be honest, you're going to find him for the most part in Trois-Rivières to start, but he has that 2-way contract, so 2-way AHL contract, might find some time as a call-up with Laval this coming season, and then that contract, which is a 2-year contract, reverts to a 1-way the following year. So that's interesting. And that doesn't mean that he can't go to Trois-Rivières. What that means is if you send him to Trois-Rivières, he's paid the same as he would be if he was playing in the AHL.
I guess another general comment coming in here. Paul Byron as an assistant coach in Laval. I believe we had someone reach out to us saying that they would like to see that happen. And there have been some stuff floating around out there. Personally, I think Paul Byron would be a great coach. He seems to have a lot of skills and assets that would lead me to believe that. But I don't think that there's anything here that leads us to believe that he would be an assistant coach in Laval, as he seems to be a little bit more interested in coaching his son's hockey team. What do you think about that, Rick?
Well, not only his son's hockey team, but he's done a very good job this season as a player development consultant for the Canadiens and individually working with players. He's worked with Owen Beck, he's worked with Jan Mysak, he's worked with Emil Heinemann, Philippe Machar, and the individual, we a couple of weeks ago, we talked about Owen Beck, referencing the advice he got from Paul Byron was second to none, that it really helped his development this season. So he seems perfectly suited for now as a player development consultant with the Canadiens. He was asked directly because of those rumors about fans saying they'd like to see him behind the bench in Laval. His quote was, "To be an assistant in the AHL, it's a full-time job, even more so when playing. We spent so much time at the rink doing video, preparing for practices and games and traveling. It's just not something I'm ready for in my life right now." So there's your answer. No. And of course, this is to fill the vacancy. We talked about JF Wool and his assistants being signing contracts again, signing contract extensions. We talked about that last week, with one exception, and that was Kelly Buchberger, who left to be GM and head coach of a team, a new expansion team in the Alberta Junior Hockey League. Of any of them on the coaching staff, Kelly Buchberger was the teacher, the best teacher of all of them. So my hope is that that's what, and I'm not saying that Paul Byron wouldn't be a great teacher. Obviously he would, but it's not something he's interested right now. However, they're going to have to find an assistant coach who has similar qualities. Also, Kelly Buchberger took care of, even though he was a forward in his career, took care of the defense, interestingly enough. So they'll have to find someone who can fill that role for the Laval Rocket, and it won't be Paul Byron.
Moving down a couple more levels here, the Saginaw Spirit beat the London Knights 4-3 to win the 2024 Memorial Cup. So big congratulations goes out to the Spirit, and especially one Owen Beck. Owen Beck in 5 games put up 4 goals, 1 assist. That's 5 points total and was a +4. So a really good campaign there for Owen Beck and Saginaw Spirit. I think these guys were kind of underdogs to an extent here, so a bit of a surprise to see them hoist the Memorial Cup, but nonetheless, big congratulations to them for pulling that off.
For sure. London Knights are a powerhouse team. They won the Ontario Hockey League Championship, and on the way in the Western Conference Final, they beat the Saginaw Spirit. And as champs of the OHL, they advanced to the Memorial Cup, and they demolished everyone on their way. They got an early pass to the final. Saginaw, the only reason they were in the Memorial Cup is because they were the host. But they fought and struggled and earned their way to the final game on Sunday. And then that final game was it was wild. Saginaw going up early, London storming back. I think it was 3 unanswered goals, and then Saginaw scoring with about 30 seconds left in the game to break the tie and take the Memorial Cup. Owen Beck with 2 goals in the final. Owen Beck named the MVP for the Memorial Cup tournament, the Stafford Smythe Memorial Trophy. So congratulations to Saginaw. Great. Also, I mean, London Knights, a great Memorial Cup championship. Unfortunately, unable to take home the cup, but especially Owen Beck getting the MVP award. That was remarkable, and that's going to be a boost of confidence as he attends the Canadiens training camp in the fall.
Some news for the 2024 World Junior Summer Showcase. It will feature 4 teams: USA, Canada, Sweden, and Finland. This will go down on July 26th to August 3rd in Plymouth, Michigan. So looking forward to that as well. It's also a pretty good opportunity to see some younger prospects.
The key here is that Canada is returning to the World Junior Summer Showcase. It's a tournament that's held in Plymouth, Michigan. It's hosted by Team USA, and this is, they invite players who may be on the watch list for the World Juniors that come up in December and January. And Canada has kind of run their own little shindig the past few years, but they are returning this year, and I think that's a good decision. Plymouth, Michigan is the home of USA Hockey, a nice little venue for them, and yeah, if you're in the area, it's worth going to see some of the prospects who may have you may have seen in the draft, who may have been just selected, and who are on as I said, on the watch list for the World Junior Championships.
A little bit more news for Habs prospects. McKeen's top 30 NHL prospects for 2024 has been released. The stipulations for what a prospect is, well, players under the age of 26 years of age as of 9/15/2024 and have appeared in less than 60 NHL games, 30 for goaltenders, and less than 35 in one season, 25 for goaltenders. So with that, coming in at number 1, Habs favorite Will Smith, and number 2, and even more Habs favorite Matvei Michkov. So that tops out that list, but we do have a few more Habs that made appearances here in the top 30, as David Reinbacher and Lane Hudson both appear in there a little bit later on the list, but nonetheless, nice to see them both included, right?
Yeah, for sure. McKeen's Hockey is one of the oldest scouting and prospect organizations. They do a great job, a terrific job. As you said, they kind of categorize or define their prospects. Everyone does it a little bit differently, but that less than 60 games is going to leave out, Canadiens prospects like Joris Slafkovsky and others. Reinbacher in at 17, Lane Hudson in at 27. It's and that's fine in the top 30. That's great. It's the It's the what could have been list.
Yeah.
Matt Van Meechkoff at number 2. Cutter Gauthier at number 4. Cutter Gauthier was offered to the Canadiens. We remember that. Ryan Leonard could have been taken by the Canadiens at number 6. Askarov, the goaltender, was offered to the Canadiens last draft by Nashville. He's in at number 8. Am I depressing you yet?
A little bit.
A little bit. Yeah, we'll end there. Again, this is a ranking thing. So the other thing that they do, which is a little bit different, and I like it, is they put out their biggest risers and their biggest fallers. And on the rise is Joshua Waugh. He's gone from number 63 in the ranking list to number 35, so just outside that top 30 ranking. The other one who made a jump is Logan Mailloux, ranked 145. He jumps 100 spots to 45. That's terrific. And the other one I saw on here somewhere was
Jacob Fowler.
Jacob Fowler is in here as well,
jumping
from
up 222 to 52. So yeah,
enormous. That's terrific. So if there are risers, I'd say there's got to be fallers, right?
Oh yeah.
The one on here that remember the Canadiens traded last year for Jacob Perreault. He was 127 last year. He's not ranked this year. And they talk about his play away from the puck hasn't improved. His skating hasn't improved. Nothing much improved. And he even went through waivers and was unclaimed before that trade to the Canadiens. So some good news, some bad news. And we're here to provide all of the news.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can find all of our content about Canadiens prospects at thn.com/Montreal. That's the Hockey News Montreal. And as we've all been waiting for, it's time to get to our quotes of the week. And we have some quotes coming from 2 players that will be available at the upcoming draft. The first one being Caden Lindstrom of the Medicine Hat Tigers. And he was asked, what's the most common question?
Yeah, for me, it's been a really good experience here so far. They're treating us really well. I think the most popular questions the teams have asked me is this just my playmaking ability. I have full confidence in my playmaking ability. I think I'm a great playmaker, and yeah.
Okay.
Nice.
He's very confident and a self-promoter. It's always good when you can ask the question, frame the question that you want, and then answer it. He says the question he's most been asked about during the combine is his playmaking ability, and he answers, "I'm a great playmaker." I'm going to call. There's a little fib going on here because that's not the question that teams are interested in about Caden Lindstrom, and that is, of course, what about your medical condition? How are you healing? And he had the back injury. The question for Caden Lindstrom is, back injury for a player so young, is this a one-off or is it a chronic issue? And we know it was most asked and most on the mind of the NHL teams because each team was provided a full medical report by Caden Lindstrom's his agent. Anyway, that's where that is, and nothing wrong with how he answered that. It's just it's just I mean he's what does Kent Hughes say? Leveraging the media. Yeah. So I think he's learned that. He also went on to say that he compares himself, or at least models himself, after Roope Hintz and Nathan McKinnon, and why wouldn't you? He just wants to improve his speed. He wants to improve his power. and how he plays in the neutral zone. So these players are young. They're getting their first exposure to NHL media environment, and I thought he did a fine job kind of framing that for putting himself in the best light there.
So let's turn things over to draft-eligible Zane Parekh of the Saginaw Spirit, a recent Memorial Cup winner, I believe, there too. He was asked, how are you different from the other defensemen at the draft?
Yeah, there's a lot of good defensemen, honestly, and for myself, I think I play a different style of hockey from most of them. But all really good, capable defensemen there, and the way I play, I like to drive pace and make plays, and I'm pretty creative in terms of the way I play. So, a different style from everyone, and teams know that. I know that. And at the end of the day, it's going to be who they fall in love with the most throughout these next few weeks.
He's very well spoken, very mature. Listened to the entire interview, and he's very well put together. And what a great way to different, because we all know this is a defensive, a draft that's heavy on defensemen, very good defensemen. There's a number of very good defensemen with slightly different styles. Zev Buium on the offensive side, as well as Zane Parekh. How are you different? How can you differentiate yourself? I thought that was a great answer. And just the little flair at the end. It's going to be the defenseman who the GM falls in love with. I thought that was a really good answer. Who does he pattern himself after? Well, that's Cale Makar, and again, why wouldn't you? He says he has a ton of videos on his phone, watches Cale Makar's shifts on the bus after games. He says he just loves the way he controls the game from the back end. It's pretty impressive. He's deceptive. I'll continue to say that guys he'll make guys bite and go the other way. He's the best at it in the NHL, and I like to incorporate parts of his game into my game. Couldn't have a better role model for the kind of game that Zane Parekh plays. Why are you guys talking about a defenseman when the Canadiens have so many defensemen and are not likely taking a defenseman? Well, it could be best player available when it gets to number 5, particularly if Lindstrom's gone, if Demidov's gone. Why wouldn't you take a defenseman who has the potential of being a clear, is Reinbacher going to be a clear number 1 defenseman? Caden Gooley? It's possible. It is possible. So we'll just ease you into those conversations.
And to echo you, when's the last time the Montreal Canadiens made the consensus picks? So you never know what they're about to do.
Exactly.
Finishing off the segment with some hockey news and notes from around the league. The Stanley Cup Final starts tonight, Saturday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. The Edmonton Oilers versus the Florida Panthers. You're getting two different styles here, but very talented teams. I'm excited to start watching this as long as it's not too late for me. I've watched Edmonton a little bit along the way here, and I've really liked what I've seen. Who would have known that a D-core featuring Cody Ceci and Brett Kulak would actually be kind of decent. They've got a good team defense going on there. Stuart Skinner's been inconsistent at best, but he's been good in the last few games. And of course, Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl. What else can you say?
It's a clash of styles. You have a very experienced head coach versus an inexperienced head coach. You have one of the elite goaltenders versus wildly inconsistent. But as you said, those two forwards that the Oilers just outscore their problems. They have great special teams, a real clash of styles. This is going to be, is this smoke and mirrors by the Oilers to get this far, or are they for real? I think that question will be answered over the next couple of weeks.
Of course, and looking forward to watching all of these games. And not to put you on the spot, but do you have a prediction for a winner here, just quickly?
Boy, I got the depth that the Florida Panthers have. and better coaching, better goaltending, more complete. It's hard to pick against the Canadian team, really hard to pick against the Canadian team, but I'm going to lean towards the Florida Panthers.
Nice. I'll take the Oilers all the way.
All right.
Anyway, survey was done by The Athletic here. I know, Rick, you took a part in this one, and it's the 2024 broadcast rankings. Number 1 is Detroit, who you said you were a very big fan of their broadcast. Montreal Canadiens come in at number 13. But coming in at 32 is the Boston Bruins with the worst broadcast. So what can you say about this?
I think they got 1 and 32 absolutely right. Boston Bruins broadcast from NESN has been horrible for generations. Jack Edwards, yes, he's awful, and he's retiring this year. But the whole, I mean, going back to Derek Sanderson, and it's always been awful. It's interesting in these rankings that they have the local fans and how they rank their own broadcast, and then the national audience who are watching it maybe as when their team is clashing with the Bruins. But both of them rate it horribly. The local ranking is 30. The national ranking is 32. And they were 30th last year, falling to 32nd this year. Awful, 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 awful. It's just, at the other end, I really like the Detroit Red Wings. It's a Bally Sports Detroit broadcast. You have a couple of former Hockey Night in Canada guys. Ken Daniels used to be kind of a sidelines reporter, Hockey Night in Canada. He's doing the play-by-play. Mickey Redmond, former Detroit Red Wing, former Montreal Canadian, as the color analyst. And their intermission, Chris Osgood and others, it's really quite well done. And I think the only other one I'm going to mention here is the Winnipeg Jets, and they're a little below. Where did they end up? Winnipeg Jets. There's the Canadiens at 13. And we have the Winnipeg Jets at 21 overall. That's our dear friend Dan Robertson doing the play-by-play broadcast for their regional games. Dan Robertson was the voice of the Canadiens on radio, and he did a few TV spots as well. Kevin Sawyer doing the color for the Jets. Interesting thing there is, the local fans, the Winnipeg Jets fans, don't like the broadcast. They rank it 26. The national audience ranks it in the top 10 at number 8. The national audience really enjoys their broadcast. Jets fans, not so much. We like Dan. We'd rank it high as well.
So interesting discrepancy there, but what can we say about that Montreal broadcast coming in at 13? I know that obviously there are a couple different broadcasts with the English and the French one, but is this something you enjoy watching, or are you more inclined to go to the away feed?
Yeah, more likely to go to the away feed. Brian Mudrick's okay as play-by-play, the kind of ordinary. Some people really like Mike Johnson. I think Mike Johnson has a Toronto focus. When he flies in, he talks to the local reporters, copies whatever they're saying, and spits it out. I don't think Mike Johnson is very good. I don't like Craig Button when he does the play-by-play, and they've introduced Frankie Corrado. I thought he was a rookie broadcaster this year. So they're ranking in the middle at 13 is kind of about right for this one.
Yeah, that seems okay. Coming along, some news out of New Jersey here. The New Jersey Devils are saying that they are willing to trade the 10th overall pick in the 2024 NHL draft as they are looking for a number one goaltender. We knew approaching the trade deadline this past season, they had a lot of interest in Markstrom. They may have actually had a deal on the table, but unfortunately Calgary could not pull through. We know Linus Ullmark is being shopped around by the Boston Bruins right now. UC Saros out of Nashville is a bit more of a dark horse to get moved. It's going to take quite a bit to convince Nashville to move along from him. But nonetheless, interesting to see that the New Jersey Devils have that 10th overall pick at play.
And the only Canadiens connection here, of course, is that New Jersey traded for Jake Allen with the intention that he would be the number 2 goaltender in the season coming up, supporting whoever the number 1 is. I saw a suggestion on our text line, 5853 Rocket, when this news came out that the Canadiens should trade Sam Montembeault for the number 10 pick in the 2024 draft, and include in the deal Jake Allen, bringing him back to the Canadiens. Well, lots wrong with that. I love the spirit. I love the creativity. Sam Montembeault not worth the 10th pick, and I don't think Jake Allen is coming back.
The 11th overall pick is also being made available by the Buffalo Sabres as they are looking for a top 6 impact forward. That means 10 and 11 are up for grabs for someone that has something of value. I'm sure that we'll mention some of the forwards that could be available in that next segment, but of course the Buffalo Sabres, I think they're at a point where they're looking past draft picks and prospects, and they're looking to make a push for the playoffs next season.
Again, going back to our text line, 5853 Rock, and I'll just encourage you to, when you send us a text, to include your name and where and your location. That's always helpful. I'll just mention this because it came in anonymously that they interpreted the Sabres looking for a top 6 impact forward to mean physical. Said Josh Anderson is physical. Why not send him for the 11th overall pick? And again, we appreciate your enthusiasm and creativity, but Josh Anderson not, of course, worth the 11th overall pick in this draft.
Yeah, I agree. News out of Prime Video. Prime Video has announced an NHL documentary series. It will feature in-depth interviews with a number of star players in around the NHL, like Connor McDavid, William Nylander, and Matt Tkachuk. So this is going to be interesting to see. I know that Prime Video is a company that's quite interested in the NHL. They put out a very short Alexander Daig documentary not too long ago that I liked quite a bit, so I'd be interested to see what they can come up with for this particular series. And
of course, under the Amazon umbrella, they're dipping their toe in NHL coverage, game coverage as well. And the Canadiens, we remember, it was a while back now, that they had a behind-the-scenes series, and they're going to get involved. But the Canadiens, you know how they do things. They don't like to be involved where they don't have editing control. They will have that to a certain extent in their own documentary series, and you can tell the folks about that.
Yep, Crave announced a Montreal Canadiens documentary series. It's going to be streaming within the next couple months. It's going to be an original 8-episode series that goes behind the scenes with the Habs in the 2023-24 season. It'll be entitled The Rebuild Inside the Montreal Canadiens. It's going to be 1 hour per episode, and it's going to be on Crave and available in both French and English. I'm really looking forward to seeing this. You see some of these docu-series that go behind the scenes often do it for teams that are maybe competing for the first place or the Stanley Cup. So it's going to be kind of cool to see what they do for a rebuild, especially after the seasons that the Montreal Canadiens just had.
Yeah, it is. But remember that everything in the video is what the Montreal Canadiens want you to see. Just keep that in mind. Just keep that in mind.
Yeah, fair enough. And last little bit of news here. The Utah Hockey Club has announced its 6 finalists for a team name. Those finalists are Utah Blizzard, Utah Hockey Club, Utah Mammoth, Utah Outlaws, Utah Venom, and Utah Yeti. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of any of these, to be honest. I know different species, but I feel like Mastodon is cooler than Mammoth. Utah Venom, I just think about the Spider-Man villain at that point. So yeah, I'm not sure that I have necessarily a favorite here. Rick, I know you had some thoughts on this as well.
Now, I have a requirement with any team name. It has to end in an S. Traditionalist, I guess. Canadiens, Bruins, Rangers, Leafs. It's got to end in an S. The spirit, the experience, whatever it is, I'm just not into that. So Black Diamonds was on the list. I mentioned that it was okay, but my favorite has to be the Outlaws. It's not a bad name, the Utah Outlaws. I kind of like that, but the Outlaws that's the only name of the 6 on the finalist list that end in an S. So I guess little chance of my wishes being respected here.
I think for me, they can stay as Utah Hockey Club until they come up with a better list. But on that note, I think it's a good time to head into our first break here. We have a brand new message from our sponsors, DraftKings. You'll want to tune in and listen to that. And then we'll get to our big topic segment, trade plan on draft day, 10 players the Canadiens could target. This is the Canadiens Connection podcast here on Rocket Sports Radio.
The chase for the Stanley Cup continues. And the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL, is just as hot as it is on the ice. With same-game parlays, live betting, odds boosts, and so much more, don't miss out as the Stanley Cup playoffs wind down. You know the final showdown between the Oilers and the Panthers is going to be hot, so make sure that you get in your bets and your choice for the winner. And if you're new to DraftKings, you gotta check this out. New customers bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code THPN. That's code THPN for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or in West Virginia, visit www.1800gambler.net. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas. 21 plus age varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. See dkng.co/ice for eligibility and deposit restrictions, terms, and responsible gaming resources. Copyright NHL 2024. All rights reserved.
Welcome back to the Canadiens Connection podcast here on Rocket Sports Radio. I'm Michael Spinella, and you can find me on Twitter at the Spinella. With me in the studio is our president and founder of Rocket Sports, Rick Stevens. Make sure to give him a follow on Twitter at Rocket Sports. You can also follow at Habs Connection on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and you can check out our website, canadiensconnection.fm. And just a little reminder here to make sure that you are subscribed to the Canadiens Connection podcast in the player on your favorite podcasting app. That way you never miss a single episode this summer, and especially as we continue our coverage leading up to the 2024 entry draft. And Rick, it seems like it's been a bit of a tradition here that the Montreal Canadiens make a big trade either just before the draft or at the draft. And you look back to last season last year when they acquired Alex Newhook for a couple of draft picks, including a first. The year before that, when I was there, and Montreal made a couple of trades in order to get Kirby Dach under their control, and it seems like it's kind of their blueprint here to accelerate the rebuild by using some of their draft capital or potentially one of their young defensemen in order to get promising underachieving talent like a forward. And certainly there is a lot of that available this season. Don't you agree?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's important to know. And why are we talking about trades when we're so close to the draft? Well, I think the Canadian strategy, at least Jeff Gorton and Kent Hughes under their regime, the strategy is that the draft day trades and the key draft choices, the selections that they make, go hand in hand in completely remaking the club. Why do they go after and make trades and go after young players? It's so that they're not all sitting back and saying, "Okay, we'll sit in our armchair and wait for these guys to develop." That these young players are going to match up in terms of their ages and their experience with the core players that the Canadiens have. And that's really important, that in order to be competitive year after year after year for the Stanley Cup, you have to have everybody peaking at the same time. You can't, you can't have you can't be waiting on players to develop. So this is the strategy that they've chosen. It's a two-pronged strategy, and the secret's out. There's going to be, we know that the Canadiens are trying to take a big swing at bringing someone in like Doc, like Newhook. And we're not saying, in the same playing style or anything like that. We're saying a young player who has a high ceiling, who has high potential, that maybe hasn't fulfilled that's maybe been a bit underachieving so far, and that with the right conditions, with the right group of development staff, with the right head coach, that they can help those young players achieve their potential. So that's what we're expecting to happen here. The Canadiens are going to draft an impact player at number 5, and they'll likely use their draft capital to bring in, either at the draft or around draft time, even before the draft. I don't know why I'm thinking that it's going to happen before the draft. Hasn't happened that way in the past. I just have that feeling. But they're likely going to make a splash.
Yeah, absolutely. And we should also mention, on top of having, in addition to that 5th overall pick, they have the 26th overall and a bit of a logjam on D. So I think that's putting them in a pretty good position to go after a forward, like one that we just described. And from us at Canadiens Connection, we present to you a list of 10 players that we put together that we think the Habs management might have their sights on. Some of them will be a little bit more, more realistic than others, but we'll try to present these in the best way possible.
And I think, some of them have come from our observations. Some of them come from listening to what's going on out there, and also some of these suggestions come from you, from your text messages, from you reaching out to us on social media. Some of your names are on this list as well, so we'll kind of categorize them as we go along. And yes, it's taking the Canadiens where they have assets in terms of draft assets, or a group of young defensemen who they're not going to have places for all of them, and turning that into a player where they're not as strong, and that at present that would be in the era of top 6 forwards. So it's again shaping, rebuilding, remaking this club so it can be balanced, so it can be moving together, growing together, developing together, and competing for a cup.
So with that, let's start with our most discussed. And Ricky did an interesting thing where it wasn't on my radar, but I believe it was about a month ago, you mentioned Marty Necas, and all of a sudden, since that moment, it seems you've conjured up something into Marty Necas being available. He's going to be a pending RFA, and the reports are saying that the Carolina Hurricanes will not extend Necas due to cap reasons. This is a very versatile forward. This is a very good player, a little bit underrated, and it's at the point where it sounds like almost every team in the league is reaching out to see what it would take. So the Canes likely don't want to bring back high-end players, as of course this has to do with money, so they're probably looking more for assets. Marty Necas right now is 25 years old, so that's kind of in line with what the Montreal Canadiens core currently is. Only making $3 million, definitely do a big pay raise, and like I said, very versatile. He can chip in defensively. He can chip in quite a bit offensively. 77 games last season, 53 points overall. But it's definitely going to cost an arm and a leg if you want this player. And do you think that Montreal would have what it takes to go after Marty Necas?
Well, yeah, first of all, do the Canadiens want a player like this? At his best, when he's on, Marty Necas is just a dynamic player. You're going to notice this player on the ice when he's on. He's a fascinating player. He's a player that who can drive the offense. The problem has been that he's not always on. There's what's the issue? Is it motivational? Is it a compete? Is it consistency? What is it? Whatever it is, they haven't been able to get the best out of him. They haven't been able to get him to his potential in Carolina, and that sounds like it fits. That underachieving and younger player. Yes, he's 25, but that matches up with some of the core players that he would be playing with in Montreal. You mentioned made $3 million last year, due a raise, an RFA. So that's going to be interesting, but we remember that there's a bit of a history between Carolina and Montreal, and some bad blood there. Now the principals, the GMs involved are no longer, not on either side, but the owners are, both of them. And we remember there was some, the owner in Carolina spoke out, the owner in Montreal let it be known that he wasn't very happy with what happened last time. So can the two organizations get together? Well, there's a new interim GM in Carolina. He has no track record. We don't know what his experience is going to be in trading. But what Elliotte Friedman said this week on the 32 Thoughts podcast, Elliotte says, quote, Carolina is letting people know they consider Necas a budding star, and that's the kind of return they want. Star power is what they want in return. Star power is what they want in return. So Merrick says in response to Friedman, okay, quote, okay, so we're not dealing with picks and prospects here. All right, so keep that when you're out on social media pounding, the messages about Marty Necas, realize that it's going to cost the Canadiens a player you like, likely.
And next on our list for most discussed, and this has been very much discussed for, I feel like, a couple of summers now, there's another F1 connection here, and that's Anaheim's Trevor Zegras, with many, many connections to this Montreal organization. The former 9th overall seems to be someone that they might have their eyes on here. He only suited up in 31 games last season due to injury, but prior to that, he put up a pair of 60-point seasons, so still young, still a budding star, still very, very talented. If you like the Michigan, this is a player that you want, but the rumored ask from the Anaheim Ducks would probably be one of Reinbacher or Caden Gooley in return. So you're certainly going to have to give up quality to get quality here. Yeah.
And Pierre LeBrun has been reporting on this. He says that the Canadiens, in his words, are going to they want to take another swing And he's talking about following Kirby Dach and Alex Newhook. That's the kind of thing that Kent Hughes is looking at again, says Pierre LeBrun. But this one is, that Pierre LeBrun says the price is likely going to dissuade, the current price is likely going to dissuade the Canadiens. He says that initially, like many of the GMs, Kent Hughes reached out, didn't like what he heard from Anaheim, but they have recently reconnected on Zegras. Then I'll quote from Pierre LeBrun, "I'm not convinced that's a path that the Habs will ultimately pursue aggressively because of what you mentioned. The asking price is going to be, as I termed it, a player that you like. It's going to be a Reinbacher. It's going to be a Gooley. It's not going to get done with the players that you don't like and want to get rid of. You're not going to send Barron. You're not going to send players that you consider cast-offs, because you have to always consider what the other team's needs are, and they're gonna like the players that you like on the team. And we've heard that in this case it's a defenseman, Anaheim looking for that, Pat Verbeek looking for that. Whether it's Reinbacher on the right side or Gooley on the left side. As I said last week, Mike Matheson's involved here with a bunch of other pieces. I'm all in, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, probably not. But, I mean, if it was just a matter of copy-paste Zegras into the Canadiens lineup, I think that would be almost the ideal player that you're looking for. A very skilled center that can bring some offense and probably, in terms of raw talent, one of the most talented players they've had in the better part of a decade here. It's just, like you said, having to give up something you don't necessarily want to give up that's going to make this very difficult and could potentially keep Kent Hughes away from making that deal.
Yeah, and you have to also think about what the Canadiens have been through to get the David Reinbacher pick was universally criticized by Canadiens fans, by pundits, by experts, by draft people all over the place. They they stood up for him and have stood beside him. Would they just wilt away now? I think that's very unlikely. Very unlikely that he'd move Gooley. Very unlikely he'd move Reinbacher. Can you interest Anaheim in a Mailloux? But Mailloux has particular qualities that you also want in the lineup. Is Zegras going to add the kind of offense you want? Yes. Is he also going to have the ability to elevate Cole Caulfield's game? One of Caulfield's good friends. So there's lots of information around this. I think this is on the unlikely side. And the only other thing that I'll add to this is that the most talked about players, the most talked about targets the past 2 years aren't the ones that the Canadiens landed. There was very little, almost nothing out there about Kirby Dach before he was landed, and there was just kind of mild speculation around Alex Newhook before the Canadiens brought him in. So that would tend to you'd tend to think that maybe Zegras and Necas are not the two who will ultimately be landing in Montreal.
And with that said, let's take a look under the radar and some of the picks that we determined not be necessarily discussed a whole lot, but could be possibilities. Let's start with a Columbus Blue Jacket in Kent Johnson, another RFA, 21 years old, kind of disappointing second year in the NHL for Kent Johnson, but still a very talented player. Not the RFA season that that he necessarily wanted, but he was a 5th overall pick in 2021. Still has a lot to prove here. His best season was that 2022 season, in which he put up 40 points in 79 games. Not too bad on a weak Columbus Blue Jackets team. So this is definitely a possibility, and certainly fits the prototype of the player that Kent Hughes is out there looking for.
Yeah, and I'm not going to speak to what's happened in Columbus. There's been a lot of turmoil in Columbus, as we know. Don Waddell, new general manager there. So how is he going to react with those Carolina roots to dealing with Kent Hughes? I think it's fair to say that Kent Johnson, it was a number 5 overall pick in 2021. Was he rushed into the NHL? Likely he was. And it was the first time this season that he spent some time in the NHL, played 10 games there. So super skilled and could be one of those kind of under the radar players that the Canadiens would be interested in.
Yeah, exactly. He spent 10 games with the Cleveland Monsters of the AHL, 15 points in those 10 games, though, so not too bad, but certainly earned his spot being sent down to the AHL, and also a season where he was plagued with injuries, only gone to 42 NHL games, too. So if you're looking for reasons that might deter you, that might be one. Still certainly very young and a ton of potential left on the table there for Kent Johnson.
For sure.
New Jersey Devils, we'll talk about them a few times. I know we mentioned them looking for a goaltender, but some pieces that they could have on the move. What about Mr. Dependable himself, one Dawson Mercer, 22 years old, RFA, spotted at the Grand Prix this morning in Montreal for F1 weekend. And despite being a very reliable player that's not really faced any injuries, the past 3 seasons he's done 82 games in each season, which is not an easy thing to do for a younger player. He's probably due for a bit of a pay raise here. New Jersey Devils have a little bit of cap space, but are they going to be able to provide Dawson Mercer the pay raise that that he'll demand, especially after bringing in players like Timo Meier and whatnot? They have a ton of other young players. This could be kind of an odd man out type situation, and Montreal certainly would have some interest if he is made available. What are your thoughts on this Dawson Mercer kid?
I think I like him. He's a smart player. I think his maybe not undersized. I think he's around 6 foot, but just as far as strength, he relies on being deceptive on the ice. And so sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. He's averaged 20 goals a season over the last 3 seasons. Again, not the dynamic player, but a really smart player who you might be able to put in different situations. This would be an interesting ad.
That's for sure. And one more New Jersey Devil to talk about here. And this is Alexander Holtz. So another 22-year-old. He's still on his entry-level deal. This is the player that I think has been a victim of a very, very good New Jersey Devils forward group. He's played a little bit further down in the lineup than you'd necessarily like him to. Not the guy that's been given a ton of opportunities. I remember in his draft year, he was mentioned to be a pure goal scorer. Pure goal scorers, when they're on the 3rd and 4th line, certainly struggle to contribute other things. He's had bits and pieces of the NHL and AHL throughout his career. Last season, he did play all 82 games in the NHL. 16 goals, 28 points. Not too bad, goals-wise at least, but you certainly would want a little bit more production from him. And this is another case of maybe an Alexander Holtz is just kind of an odd man out, and this could be a player that maybe New Jersey can use that they can flip out for a place of need.
Yeah, they haven't found the right match for him to unleash. He's a pretty special player. He was number 7, 7th overall in the 2020 draft. He's got a crazy good shot, and just a real threat to score. I don't know if I would see him as a player that you'd want on your power play on your top unit. I'm not sure that he got that opportunity with the Devils. Again, this is a guy who, and listen, I'm not saying for the players that we mentioned on this list, it's not all on the teams. That in some cases the players have not taken advantage of the opportunities they've been given. But that's the risk that you take when you're going after an underachieving player. Kind of figuring that you see something that you can unlock that the other teams have not been able to. This is, again, it's an under the radar choice. And there is some experience with trading with New Jersey. We talked about the Jake Allen trade. So that's why the Dawson Mercer, I'd lean towards Mercer, but Alexander Holtz are on this list as well.
Yeah, I think in terms of the fit with Montreal, Alexander Holtz, you talked about him being an offensive threat, a good shot, somebody you want on your first power play unit. I mean, Montreal's a team certainly looking to improve their power play, looking for more offense throughout their lineup. So Alexander Holtz is certainly a guy that could do that, and he could even fit within that top line. Unsure which side he typically plays on, but whether it's on the top line with Suzuki or if it's on that second line, I can certainly see him coming in and being the ideal fit and exactly the type of player that Montreal should want to go after, at least.
Yeah, for sure.
And moving down the list here, the last one in our under the radar is coming out of Winnipeg, Cole Perfetti. So another RFA, the same draft year as Alexander Holtz, actually. And kind of similarly with the Winnipeg Jets here, he's a good player. He's just not been prioritized very high up in that lineup. Quite often he's ending up having to be quite lower. This is a player where I think it's more about IQ. He's not the fastest skater, but he can get up and down the ice pretty well. Again, offensive numbers are okay. Last season, he suited up 71 games, 19 goals, 19 assists. Not too shabby whatsoever, but certainly if you're the Winnipeg Jets, I think you're in a position where you think you want to win next season, the season after. Maybe Cole Perfetti isn't ready to take a big jump this or next season, so you're looking to potentially flip him out for a player that is good right now. If you're Montreal, yeah, I think the fit there is pretty obvious. Young forward with some scoring potential and some good IQ. Again, it might be difficult to pry him out of Winnipeg. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you're right there. He's Winnipeg, especially Kevin Cheveldayoff, really likes this player. Taken 10th overall in the 2020 draft. He's just so smart and really good as a puck carrier, and he makes something happen. For whatever reason, he couldn't find his way into the lineup, at least in a place where he could make a difference. He only played once in the Jets playoff run, and maybe that was Scheifele and Ehlers and Connor. There was too many of similar type of players in that lineup. Now, having said that, there's a different head coach, Scott Arniel, coming in, bumped up from an associate coach to the head coach, coaching ranks, and maybe Scott Arniel has got different plans for Cole Perfetti than Rick Bowness did, and in that way, I like Cole Perfetti a lot. Whether the price would be too high, or whether Winnipeg is just not willing to let him go. That's something, although Kent Hughes has a bit of a relationship with Cheveldayoff, and we know that.
Yeah, of course, Montreal made a trade with Winnipeg earlier this season for Sean Monahan there to get that first-round pick. So, like you said, a little bit of a relationship there, and wouldn't be too surprising if those two got talking once again.
Yeah, that's right.
Players that we have categoried under unlikely, coming from the New York Rangers, Capo Kakko, RFA, only 23 years old, if you can believe it. He's got about bits and pieces of 5 different seasons in the NHL here. Only played full 82 games once in the 2022-23 season. I remember this was a player with a lot of hype about him, a number 2 overall pick, and some even debated that he could be skilled enough to be a number 1 in another draft, but going number 2 there and just has not found his way in that New York Rangers lineup. I know the Rangers are pretty stacked forward-wise, so this could be another case of him just not getting a ton of opportunity. But he's been there for quite a while, and he's yet to make a huge splash. His career high, 40 points, maybe more of a defensive mind. But what do you think about the 23-year-old Capo Caco? It does seem like maybe this fits the bill of a Kirby Dach or an Alex Newhook style player, at least.
Yeah, I mean, he's smart. He's an offensive player. I just don't know if the NHL style matches his style. He just looks, when he's out there, he looks very deliberate. He, kind of a slow, meandering east to west. He's not a north-south player at all. And I mean, he's not. He's willing to get engaged. He can be physical at times. I just don't know. And listen, the folks who are gonna know, Nick Bobroff and Jeff Gorton, certainly involved, and would have their own knowledge. The other thing we have to worry about here is a bit of bad blood between the GMs, the organizations. So whether that weighs into it at all, and we're calling this an unlikely move, and I think that's pretty fair.
Yeah. Next on the list here from the Los Angeles Kings is Arthur Kaliev, the RFA, 22 years old once again. This is a player, I think we both liked him in junior. He's been all right at the NHL level. He's not played a full 82-game season as of yet. Career high is currently 28 points. Maybe more of an offensive threat in his junior years. I don't know if this was maybe a case of him being rushed, although he spent some time in the AHL, but for whatever reason with Los Angeles, it's not been a very good fit. He was a second-round pick by the Kings. He had potential to be a first-round pick, but he certainly dropped a little bit there. Yeah, it's hard to know what to make of this player. He has his moments where he looks brilliant, but certainly been inconsistent. What do you think about Arthur Kaliev here? Is this someone Montreal can have at least see a fit on their lineup with?
When we see the Kings, I just he hasn't. He's not always in the lineup. I just don't notice him. What we saw in junior, and he played with the Hamilton Bulldogs. It was his shot, both wrist shot, slap shot, real heavy shot, just lethal. We haven't seen that often enough with the Kings, and I don't know that he may have been on the Canadiens' radar at one point. I don't know if he's still there or not.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. Coming again once to the Columbus Blue Jackets here, Patrick Laine, who I think has been kind of swirled in and out of trade rumors at different times. Still only 26 years old, so still relatively young, making $8.7 million per season right now. Of course, this is a player where when he's on and he's scoring, he's virtually unstoppable, but I think he struggled to do that over the course of a full season. This one, I'm reluctant to see much of a fit with the Montreal Canadiens, but again, this would probably be a little bit of a project to try and get him back to his old form. It's not been a great fit for him in the Columbus, but I know that you probably watched him quite a bit in Winnipeg. What do you think about Patrick Laine? Yeah,
well, I think that's his first 2 or 3 seasons where he's scoring 30 goals. He got over the 40-goal mark. One of those seasons, as you say, just lethal. And I think that anyone who is promoting a Patrick Laine thinks of that Patrick Laine, who is just, he's a force offensively. He's physical. And it's just been a bit of a disaster since he left Winnipeg. And things were happening in Winnipeg as well. Attitude issues and so on with Columbus. Just 18 games this past season, and registered in the NHLPA Player Assistance Program. So there's some issues there, and whether the Canadiens want to wade into that or not. I know that there are some media outlets who are promoting this player. I to be honest, I just don't see it.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And the last player on our list, and I will let it be known, I did want this player to be included just because there's just so much noise coming from the Toronto Maple Leafs media all the time, and I had to throw on Mitch Marner, 27 years old, $10.9 million per season, going into the last season of his contract here. With everything that's gone on with Toronto and Mitch Marner, it at least seems like the relationship there could be quite soured. He was a bit of a no-show in the playoffs last season. They're not going to be trading Matthews. They're not trading Nylander. I don't think anyone's going to buy John Tavares from the Toronto Maple Leafs. If they want to break up that quote-unquote core four, I think the guy that's the odd man out here is Mitch Marner. If he is available, look, he's a fantastic player. He's had many great seasons, 99-point career high 1 year, the 2022-23 season. Every team in the NHL should probably call to at least inquire if this is a player that's available, including the Montreal Canadiens. He's 27 years old, so he's still relatively young. But again, it's that price point for him. It's the fact that it's 1 year left on the contract, and it's the fact that the relationship between him and the Leafs is soured. I don't know if there's attitude issues or what's quite gone on there, but this certainly it's a player that you have to talk about. Kent Hughes would not be doing his job if he didn't at least inquire here. But I'd say that out of everyone on the list, this would be the most unlikely. What do you think about Mitch Marner there?
Well, I'm just looking at pictures of Valtteri Bottas driving the Zamboni in shower shoes, the sandals, and it's a nice get. No, I don't want to talk about Mitch. The Leafs media talks way too much about the core four and Mitch Marner and all of it. I just don't want to get dragged into it. I think what you said is yes, it's a responsible thing if there's a player of this caliber on the market who can make such a difference. I just don't think he's a fit at all with where the Canadiens are going and what they want to do. But I understand, and you're right. He should have been included on this list, and teams should be inquiring about him. I just don't think it should be the Canadiens, and I'll go back to the Valtteri Bottas on the Zamboni at Place Bell. Sorry, this is at Broussard.
Oh, nice. Is Snoop Dogg's people there for the meet and greet yet? Or?
I don't know. Yeah, he wants to drive the Zamboni as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But anyways, that got a little bit off the rails. But we presented to you a list of 5 players, and knowing what Kent Hughes' MO has been the last
10 players.
10 players. I don't know why I said 5, but anyways, we know Kent Hughes is certainly going to be on the lookout for that type of player as we approach this draft. He's got a ton of draft capita. I'm looking at that number 26 overall pick that the Montreal Canadiens have control over, and I do wonder if that's going to be at play. Would that be at play for any of these players? Well, we'd certainly like to hear from all of our listeners about it. And our Canadiens Connection question of the week is, are Marty Necas or Trevor Zegras worth the price tag to acquire? And what would you be willing to trade to bring them to Montreal? We want to hear from you. And with that, Rick, do you have anything final that you wanted to talk about before we head into the break here?
I'm ready to get to the break, and I'm ready to also check out our text line, because I want to see where Canadiens fans are what they're willing to give up to get a player of the caliber of Zegras or Necas.
So it's time to take a break here. We'll head into that final break. You'll hear a message from our sponsors, and then we'll be right back with you in a few moments. Stay with us. This is the Canadiens Connection podcast here on Rocket Sports Radio.
The Canadiens Connection is proud to be a partner of Rocket Sports Media, digital media publishers of sports and entertainment websites. Their mission is to build a worldwide network of sports fans who are informed, engaged, entertained, and connected. Learn more about RSM, its team, and its portfolio of brands at rocketsportsmedia.com. I bet you enjoy sporting your best Habs jerseys, dressing up your kids and pets in the cutest Habs gear, and showing off your decked-out hockey cave or fanning. Well, don't just show your friends, show your Habs. The Rocket Sports Media team wants you to boast your finest pictures for our global network of Montreal Canadiens fans. Include the hashtag #ShowYourHabs when posting your fan photos on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. Then log on to showyourhabs.com to see your entries, along with photos and posts from Habs fans all over the world. A proud member of the Rocket Sports Media Network. If you're a business owner looking for the perfect platform to reach a targeted audience of customers, Rocket Sports Media is the solution. Our global hockey community provides unmatched social media reach to an attentive demographic of sports and entertainment fans. We can provide visibility to your company, helping you to engage and leverage this prime group of potential clientele. In addition, we also offer sponsorship opportunities for fan events and featured areas of website content, giving you name and logo recognition. Visit rocketsportsmedia.com to contact us regarding this unique marketing opportunity. For the most trusted source of news, analysis, and features about the Montreal Canadiens, log in to thn.com/Montreal, your year-round source for anything Habs related. That's thn.com/Montreal.
Welcome back to episode 299 of the Canadiens Connection podcast here on Rocket Sports Radio. You can follow at Habs Connection on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and you can check out our website, canadiensconnection.fm. And feel free to text us anytime via the Rocket Sports text line. It's 5853-ROCKET. That's 5853-ROCKET. That text line is open anytime. So as you listen, send us all your comments and questions along the way, and make sure that you include your name and where you're from. That way we know who we're talking to. And Rick, kind of a fun segment there. A little bit different from a typical draft coverage, but still kind of important specifically for the Montreal Canadiens to kind of discuss these topics.
No, you're right. It's because it's part and parcel. It's part and parcel of the rebuild. It's part and parcel of the draft to talk about who the Canadiens are going to take a swing at, to borrow that phrase, and try to land so that added to the roster, you're going to have a young, underachieving prospect, as well as, unless they go nuts and trade that number 5 pick, but as well as an impact player that you're going to be able to a young prospect who has the potential of being an impact player. So we want to give you the complete coverage, and we want to. It would be doing a disservice if we didn't mention both sides of the conversation, trades and the draft.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we continue our coverage throughout this offseason, leading up to the draft, free agency, and everything else that goes down, well, here's what you need to know from Rocket Sports. We cover the Montreal Canadiens for the hockey news, and you can find all of that content at thn.com/Montreal. All of your Canadiens coverage in one place. And if you're interested in multimedia content, we also have a YouTube channel. You can just search at All Habs and you'll be able to pull it up there. And throughout the week, we sprinkle in tons of different types of content. On Mondays, you'll find this podcast, The Canadiens Connection, on there. Last week's episode was entitled NHL Draft. Scouting Director named 6 Canadiens first-round choices. Make sure that you check it out on YouTube if you have not already. You can leave a like if you like what you saw. Hit subscribe so you don't miss out on anything. And leave us a comment too if you have anything that you want to say to us, any comments or questions. You agree, you disagree. That's a great way to interact with us right there on our YouTube channel. Throughout the week, Amy Johnson hosts a pair of shows too. You can look out for episodes of the Rocket Hockey Report, and you can also look out for episodes of the Habs Hockey Report on YouTube as well. Make sure that you are subscribed, as the latest episode of that was entitled Off-Season Update. Canadiens and Rocket announced 4 contracts. Amy Johnson did a good job outlining all 4 of those contracts, and make sure, as on top on top of subscribing, you also hit the notification bell. That way you're notified the moment we put out a brand new piece of content. And throughout this off season, look out for some watch along live streams. I've been hosting a lot of these with my Rocket Sports Media colleague Nathan throughout the season. We did one for the draft lottery, and look out for some more throughout the off season. We want to make sure that we share all those great moments with you, and that's another great way to interact with us because we have a live chat on there. So the main point here, make sure you head over to youtube.com/allhabs, hit a like, hit subscribe, and tap that notification bell so you don't miss out on any of our content.
Great advice.
Absolutely. And while you're doing that too, if you want more Habs coverage, well, make sure that you're subscribed to the premier Rocket Sports Radio podcast on your favorite podcast app. The Canadiens Connection comes out every single Saturday, even throughout the summer. Rick, we don't go on vacation. Sometimes I might not be around, but I know you're here every single week. So make sure that you come around and hang out with us throughout the summer. You can find every single episode at CanadiensConnection.fm. If you've missed any, that's a great way to find the full archive of all of our episodes. And if you enjoyed it, we'd really appreciate if you left us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. We are your inside link to the Montreal Canadiens. And this offseason, I think this Rocket Sports team is looking to recruit some fine people. So if you are interested, Rick, what's the best way to do so? And what kind of people are we looking for?
Well, you got to be talented. You got to be passionate about hockey. And if you're passionate about the Montreal Canadiens, that wouldn't hurt. You got to be committed. And you got to be able to work with the wonderful team that we already have. If you're all of those things, then we want to hear from you. Send me an email, hello@rocketsportsmedia.com. Tell me how you think you can best contribute to us, whether it's writing an article, whether it's helping us on the graphic side, whether it's helping us in the podcast, whatever it is. We do want to hear from you, and this is our loyal viewers are where we often bring in some of the best people that are part of the Rocket Sports team.
Absolutely, and we're looking forward to talking with all of you. With that, it's time to get to our Canadiens Connection question of the week, and to all of our listeners, we ask, are Marty Necas and Trevor Zegras worth the price tag to acquire, and what would you be willing to trade to bring them to Montreal? We want to hear from you. Send us a message on our Rocket Sports text line, 5853-ROCKET. Rick, you also mentioned that email, but I'll get you to mention that once again. If people have a little bit more to say, how can they email us? Email us at hello@rocketsportsmedia.com. hello@rocketsportsmedia.com. We get tons of text, tweets, comments, and emails throughout the week. And Rick, what have all of our listeners been thinking about this week? We're going to turn to Twitter this week. And on Twitter, we heard from Darren Callahan. That's at Darren Calla 2. And Darren says, the first podcast I listened to, you folks, and that was last week's podcast with the special guest, Jerome Berube from Hockey Prospect. Darren says, first podcast I listened to of you folks. Great listen. You've gained a new fan. Welcome. We're having all kinds of new people find us because we have the best draft coverage there is. And that's because of some wonderful guests. So welcome to Darren. Welcome to any of you. What I can tell you is be sure to subscribe to this podcast on whatever podcast app you use to make sure you don't miss any others. Also on Twitter, we have Zenos. His Twitter handle is @FrontRowerDie, and says he's a Canadiens and Rocket season ticket holder. Zenos says, like Darren, I too have recently become a listener of the podcast. On the matter of the Canadiens being a year away from competing or making the playoffs, I disagree for reasons that I can't possibly list here. I'm very bullish on the team, and I'd be very surprised if they don't garner a wild card playoff spot next season. So we're happy to have you as a recent listener. We're hope that you're subscribed to Zenos, and we're always happy to hear your opinions. So continue to reach out to us. We love hearing from each and every one of our listeners throughout the weeks, and we look forward to hearing what you have to say next week. Coming up, some things to look forward to in our CH Weekly. Next Saturday on June the 15th, we will have another special guest. It will be Michael Agello. He'll be giving us the rundown on everything that happened at the NHL Scouting Combine. So really looking forward to that. And on Saturday, June the 22nd, we will once again have another draft expert guest featuring for an interview on our Big Topic segment. So we'll continue along with our NHL 2024 draft coverage, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what everyone has to say.
For sure.
So for today, that's going to be a wrap. Thank you all for listening. Make sure that you are subscribed to the Canadiens Connection podcast in the player or on your favorite podcasting app. You can also share it on social media if you like what you heard. Enjoy the week, and we'll be back here next Saturday, June the 22nd, for another great episode. Thank you all for listening to the Canadiens Connection podcast here at Rocket Sports Radio.
Click subscribe so you never miss an episode of Canadiens Connection. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Rocket Sports.